because America isn't an ethnicity. It's a set of principles. And here's the most important thing you have to understand. The left wants to change those principles. That's when they say destroy America. They want to change what America is. And you cannot let that happen.
My guest today is former Senator Rick Santorum. Rick served 2 terms in both the House of Representatives and Senate representing the state of Pennsylvania. During his time in Washington, he gained a reputation as one of the nation's leading government reformers, pro-life advocates, and national security experts. Rick and his wife Karen are also the co-authors of Bella's Gift, that chronicles the inspiring story of life with the Santorum special needs youngest child. I recently sat down with Rick and we talked about why it's so hard to drain the swamp, the problem with a weak U.S. foreign policy, and his thoughts on the 2024 presidential election. Senator Rick Santorum, thanks so much for being on the show. I greatly appreciate it. And from the moment that I was told that you're going to be able to be on the show, I'm really excited because I have so many things I want to talk to you about.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure. And thanks for your great work for the cause. We appreciate it.
Great, man. All right. So, I didn't know until I was watching before this our conversation. We have a very good mutual friend relation. That's Governor Huckabee. And I saw you on the Huckabee show. You were great. First of all, this guy is a statesman. He is just such a good human being.
Yeah, Mike and I go way back, and we were opponents, but he was the friendliest opponent I've ever had in politics. I mean, we even though we were running the same time in 2016, we sort of commiserated a lot because we were going through the same things.
Right.
And, in the Trump tornado, being one of the things flying around in the air, getting hit up against everything that's also flying in the air. So it was a tough time. But Mike's just salt of the earth kind of guy, and tell it like it is kind of guy, and as you said, I mean, a terrific entertainer. I mean, he really can communicate. Because he's a great storyteller. He's got that entertainment flair to connect with people that is rare in politics. So he's a great gift to our country.
Yeah, and he's genuine. He's a genuine guy. You get what you. Yeah. He was over for lunch. We were in Florida and we did some things together because he was the first guest on my show. I called him up. We said, Governor, I'd like you to be on the podcast. We didn't have a podcast. Just had an idea, and he says, sure. I was on it. It was just, and thank God it's been successful since then. And large part has to do with him.
Good. Well, I'm glad he gave you out a good start. I hope I don't end your career here.
Yeah, no, not at all. I waited, I waited for the heavy hitters before so don't worry about it. You're a batting cleanup. So first off, before we begin, I got so many things I want to talk to you about. But before we begin, how does a guy like you get into politics? We're more or less the same age or so, born in the early 60s, right? 60s, you were born 59?
I was born in 58.
58, right. So I was born 62, pretty close age, grew up more or less the same time period. So the terrible, terrible years of Carter, inflation. We went through Richard Nixon. We both saw Reagan and the revolution that this country went through. And Washington was, just not a good place. How does a clean-cut guy like you with Boy Scout looks get into this game?
Well, I grew up in a somewhat of a unique environment. Both my parents worked for the Veterans Administration, and I was raised on posts. You think of Army brats and Air Force brats, going and moving from base to base. Well, back in the days when we were young, there were still VA posts. In other words, you had a veterans hospital, but you had families who worked there who lived on the post and went to work there. And so my parents met after the war, after actually the Korean War. But my father served in World War II, and my mom was a nurse. And long story short, they met, got married, and they raised a family on post. So I always say I lived the first 18 years of my life in public housing. So I was around. My dad worked. My mom was a nurse at the VA. My dad, worked with mental health patients. Obviously, a lot of PTSD wasn't diagnosed as that then, but drug and alcohol, a lot of those things. And so I interacted, because I lived there. I interacted with servicemen and women, and I did so at a time, I didn't realize it. Obviously, you're young. You have that's your only experience. When I'd go on TV and I'd see how people hated, our men and women in uniform. And I know that's for young people today, they find that sort of hard to believe.
Oh,
But imagine police officers today. That's how veterans were looked at back when I was growing up. I mean, they were seen as dirty and corrupt and
baby killers.
Fighting imperialists.
All right, baby killers after Vietnam. They were considered it's spit out. Oh, it's terrible.
Exactly, it was horrible. And here I was living on post, seeing these men and women, mostly men at that time, but men and women, and these were great, heroic, wonderful people who were suffering so much from what they went through, whether it was physical or mental issues. And so I sort of was raised with that. Our country is really a great country, but there are people out there who I saw it, and they were on the left. And so I was raised a conservative, not because my parents were conservative. They were sort of typical Americans. They weren't political at all. But I was raised with the idea of really loving our country because of having that experience with our veterans. And so when I went, and that sense of service, I mean, that's something my dad, he was an immigrant to this country, and he drummed in, America's the greatest country in the world. You got to, do what you can to protect America, defend America, serve America. And so that was sort of, that experience. I became a Republican because the people who respected veterans were Republicans. The people who didn't were the other side, not because of philosophy or anything else.
Right.
It was just sort of that knee-jerk reaction to having grown up in it.
Yeah. Back in the 70s, which, I had on the show a few weeks ago, General Mary Eder, one of the few generals, female in the United States Army. 37 years she served. And we were talking about that. She joined 1977. And I asked her, how was it then? She goes, we were advised not to wear our uniforms in civilian public. And when we were in Europe, we were told not to go out alone because they were getting beat up. That's what our service people were going through at the time.
Yeah, we forget. I mean, it's like forgetting 9/11. I mean, it's just, every generation, if you don't live it and experience it, it didn't happen. And that's sort of where we are right now. And of course, then you have people like Howard Zinn who retell history. And then we end up teaching that to our children. So they don't even understand, what the real dividing lines are here in America, and what made this country special, and what we have to reclaim if it's going to be special in the future.
Yeah. Where's your father immigrant from? Where did he come from?
Italy. He was from northern Italy. My grandfather came here back in 1923. Mussolini came to power, and he was very anti-fascist, and so he pulled out of this beautiful little idyllic town on the shores of Lake Garda in northern Italy. It's absolutely. I mean, it's a tourist place. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous, and he had a job. And anytime I tell people that who are familiar with it, they say, "Why would he ever leave there?" It's because he didn't want to live under fascism, and he worked in the coal mines till he got his citizenship, and then brought the rest of the family over in 1930.
Wow, my grandparents came here from Russia in 1922, and I remember speaking because I loved history, and I used to speak to them a lot, especially my grandfather. And I said, "Why did you, communism? Why did you go?" He goes, "Charles, you don't know what the Tsar was like. The Tsar was terrible. And we were promised utopia, and it was even more horrible. And we were just lucky to get out of there, And he had a sense, and I remember this so vividly. It's just such a thing. He always said, especially since we're Jewish, he said, we were never allowed to vote. He says, always vote. And he voted in every single election. He goes, it's my privilege to be in this country and being able to vote. Never, ever take that for granted. And, my mother was the same way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know we have immigration issues here, particularly obviously with the southern border, which are wrong and we need to stop. But there's also something beautiful about having people come from countries where there is fascism and socialism and a totalitarianism, authoritarian, and come here to this country and really appreciate what we have. And I think we just have a lot of people in America today who don't understand what they're doing. They're just the fact that you see the left now wanting to increase the power of the government and establish this speech codes and saying that speech is violence and violence in defense of our principles is speech. right? Those are the things that you see from, you saw when I was growing up, the books we read with 1984 and Animal Farm. Like those are the things that you look for in a government that is dishonest and it is out there, as you just said, telling the people, we can take care of everything. Just give us more power and we'll solve all problems. And that, that's a lie. That's just false. No government in the history of man has solved all problems. I mean, America is great because we've had limited government and we allowed people and markets and families to solve our own problems, not depending upon someone else to do it. But that is always the siren song. And if there's anybody singing it right now, it's the progressives in Washington, D.C. are singing this siren song that, just give us more money, give us more power, let us pass one more bill. Yeah, the other thing we didn't work, but that's because we just didn't do enough. It's not because it's wrong. It's just that we need more of it, and it'll work if we get more of it. And believe it or not, people buy it, and we have to do a better job of telling the truth.
Yeah. Two things on that just bring to mind is one that I saw a study that showed that 50%, 50, of the Fortune 500 CEOs are either immigrants or children of immigrants. Is that amazing? Where else in the world does that happen?
Yeah.
Answer is nowhere.
Man. Right? I'm the child of an immigrant that ran for president of the United States. So there you go. It doesn't happen anywhere else. No, and that's one of the great things about our country.
And number two, they're standing at the border. They're digging tunnels. They're taking rowboats. They're giving everything to come here, not North Korea, not Russia, not China, not Germany, not England, but to the United States of America.
And it's overwhelmingly people of color, and they're coming to a place
this racist country, right? This racist country, yeah.
It's this systemically racist country, right? This horrible country for people of color, and you have people from color all over. You have Haitians who are, going through, the jungle and risking death to come to this systemically racist country. Again, the frustrating thing for me is it's so obviously true what we're saying and so obviously a lie what the other side says, and yet it seems hard for us to convince people of the truth.
Nope.
And that tells you that's a very disconcerting thing in America today. Okay. Is that recognition of truth is becoming more and more difficult for more and more people.
And I want to tell you just my personal opinion why I think that is. I was thinking about this last year when New York was burning and socialism was even given, it actually said as even a possibility why it's better than capitalism. It was just a joke. That's why, by the way, that's why I was on Governor Huckabee's show last year, October, talking about that, socialism versus capitalism, which was just to even put that in the same sentence, even discuss that is ridiculous. And, I think the reason is because sensible, logical, rational people, we left the universities. We handed it over to the liberals and the leftists, and we're getting our comeuppance. Look, every society that wanted to take over, what did they do? They forgot about the parents. They went straight to the kids. You indoctrinate the kids and you own them. And you have people, which was so amazing during the New York last year at the BLM riots and tearing down New York, they were all taking pictures of it and videoing it on an iPhone, not created by a socialist government, by an entrepreneur in this country. And we're such a bad place. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But
I wrote a book back in 2004, 2005 called "It Takes a Family." It was in response to Hillary Clinton's book "It Takes a Village." Yeah. And I talk about what had happened over the past 50 years, and actually longer when it comes to higher education. You're right that the left took over higher education. We went off and wanted to make money, and they packed the professorships and academia. And like it or not, the most of the new leaders of our country over the past 40, 50 years have all come through institutions of higher learning and have gone through that propaganda mill that is higher education. And you throw on top of that, that was the first thing to go down. The second thing that would go down was Hollywood. Hollywood used to be a place that would enforce American values. They would do propaganda films, in the 40s and 50s. And then that changed, and Hollywood has become as woke, more so than even academia. And I forget who said it, but someone said, give me the storytellers, and I will control your country in a generation. And the storytellers, all of the storytellers, primarily in America today, are people who tell lies. They tell lies about our culture. They tell lies about human sexuality. They tell lies about how markets and economies work. They tell lies about government. They tell lies, and as I said before, they've been so much encapsulated by these two great institutions. To throw on top of that the news media, which is now completely a propaganda arm of the left. And again, you say, well, why can't people recognize the truth? Well, because they're lied to all the time, and that's it's hard if what the norm is a lie. It's hard to recognize the truth as it is.
In Howard Zinn's book, People's History of the United States, is the textbook. Yeah. And Das Kapital is taught in colleges as an alternative life, as alternative government, even though they just put aside the 100 million killed between Mao Zedong and Stalin in the 20th century.
Yeah, they just did it wrong.
Nah, see, that to me is the arrogance, right? I think someone said there were 42 cases of socialism actually practiced in the 20th, 21st century. All of them got it wrong, but we know how to do it right.
Yeah,
just absolutely amazing.
It is arrogance, and it's a. I always say, well, people ask me, why are you conservative? So I said, because conservatism is a recognition of looking back and seeing what the essence of human nature is and what works, and trying to keep that in place, so the next generation has an opportunity to have things work well for them. It's not, I would say conservatism isn't an ideology. It's a practical guide of understanding the essence of human nature and the essence of how government and media institutions work with the individual and the family, and constructing a system that has proven to be the most successful in giving people and families the best opportunity to succeed and be happy. That's what conservatism is. It's nothing more than that.
Right. Yeah, that's a good definition. I like that. So let me get right to it. You were in Congress. You were in the Senate. You were part of the swamp. You were part of the legislature. You were part of Washington. You know how things work there. Now, growing up, I grew up on a middle class neighborhood. My father was a warehouse manager. 2 doors away from me was a sanitation worker. Across the street was a school teacher. We were like salt of the earth kind of people, truck drivers. And on hot summer nights, we used to sit on someone's stoop, and the men would be drinking beer, and we kids would have iced tea. And they made every problem that New York was going through, the government was going through, they took these complex so-called and they solved them. It was simple, and it made all the sense in the world. Now, the reason I bring that up is we recently have seen the it's no better word than what happened in Afghanistan than a retreat. I had Ambassador John Bolton on. I couldn't even think of the word. He goes, no, it was a retreat. We retreated. And the average person gets, first of all, you don't put a line in the sand and say August 31st and box yourself into a corner. Secondly, you don't take the troops out without telling your allies, without getting everything in place, without getting quarters. These are simple things that someone sitting on the stoop in Brooklyn, New York, drinking iced tea could figure out. Why the heck can't Washington?
Well, it's not, I don't think it's that they couldn't figure it out. It's what your objective is. And what Joe Biden's objective was to keep a political promise, and to do so with a minimum, with if possible, no American casualties. He didn't care whether the Taliban took over. He didn't care what happened in Afghanistan, as long as he could get his political win. Because remember, what you have to understand, I've seen this with the left as long as I can remember. They don't care about what's going on around the world. If they did, the left, who is in favor of women's rights, would be protesting what's going on in Islamic countries or in Africa, but they don't. Why? Because all they care about is themselves. I mean, let's just understand this. Joe Biden cares about himself. He cares about his own political future. And so what he did was put together a plan which he thought was maximum benefit for him and minimal risk. Maximal benefit, I win, we get out. I can say we got out. We didn't lose any troops. And by the way, the thing that I'm most concerned about is not getting out of Afghanistan, other than to keep a promise, but by getting that political capital from getting out and not having anybody killed. By the way, if you take all your troops out before any Taliban are anywhere near you, you're not going to get anybody killed. And so that's what he decided to do. And the general said, wait a minute, you're going to have all this mess. I don't care. That's their problem, not mine.
Let me interrupt you a second, man. Let me interrupt you a second. I just can't get my head around this. You're talking about a guy who's been in government for 47 or so years or so, 40 plus years. Not a stupid man, because he's in that position. I have to give him some credibility that you just don't fall into that position. He has his political savviness. You're telling me it's that simple? That's
yeah, look,
I
well,
just
there's
don't.
a combination of things. I mean, I can get in deeper, but Bob Gates said this, and I always, and he's been quoted often saying this, but I have to tell you, I said it many, many, many times before Bob Gates ever said it. And just so you know, I mean, because I served with Joe. I served with Joe for many years, and I saw it. I did battle with Joe on national security many times.
Tell us what Bob Gates said.
Bob Gates said, Joe Biden has the most experience of any president in history, or vice president at the time, and any vice president in history, and he's been wrong every single time on national security. And it's true every single time. I mean, there's just not one case where he got it right. And so here is Joe Biden thinking, well, it won't matter, because again, he doesn't understand. I think you give him too much credit for knowledge. I think he's someone who, again, looks only at what the impact is on his ability to get his bills passed. He's got these two bills. Remember, this was August. September is when they're coming back into session. They're going to start dealing with the infrastructure bill and the big social welfare bill. And he wanted to win, so he would have wind at his back, so he could get Democrats to support this and push through, $5, $6, $7 trillion in new spending, and create a socialist, republic here in the United States. That's what his objective was. And as the old saying goes in the military, you have a plan, but the enemy has a vote. And in this case, our ally has a vote, and the ally and the enemy both did things that turned out to be devastating to what Joe Biden, and by the way, not unpredictable. Anybody with a brain should have figured out. And by the way, most of the military advised the president not to do this. But again, he didn't care, because he didn't think anyone would get hurt. And let's be honest, if he didn't have to send troops back, if there was a way for him to get people out without having to send the troops back, if we left a few Americans behind, as you can see, we've left Americans behind, and the media has moved on. There's no hue and cry, the fact that there are Americans still in Afghanistan. And he figured right, that if what he figured wrong was that no one would get out. He figured, we'd have a few weeks, a few months, and by then the people would be afraid and they'd get out, and there'd be some Americans behind it. But the media's on my side, no one would pay attention, and I'd have a big win. And the problem is, things move faster than what he even thought, and he got caught with having to put troops back, and that's where things turned into a mess. Because once you send troops back, then the media has to cover it. They didn't want to cover. Let me assure you, CNN and MSNBC and CBS, they didn't want to cover what was going on in Afghanistan. They had to, because there was an unfolding mess in front of them, and as soon as they could stop covering it, they did.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say that you're right. You just sort of disappear off the faces of the paper. I think just today I saw that the interpreter, the translator who saved him got out. The fact that this person had to plead to get out after so long, so 2 months later or so, was just absolutely, it's just sad. It's just nothing more than that. It's just sad.
Well, I mean, look, again, I hate to say this, but I was working with people during this time, and still working with folks trying to get people out of Afghanistan. And the one thing I heard over and over again was our government was the greatest. It wasn't the Taliban was the problem. It was our government. And again, you go back to they never prepared. They didn't. I hate to say they didn't care, but they didn't do what was necessary to make sure that these people who were going to be, killed by the Taliban or by other groups in Afghanistan for what they did in supporting America, or by converting to Christianity, or whatever vulnerable group it was, they just didn't care. And the bottom line is, the media wasn't going to make them care because they weren't going to cover any of this, and they're not covering any of this.
Yeah, I know. I saw the Journal and the New York Post at the time were covering the soccer team that we give the Wall Street Journal give a play-by-play of the Afghan girls soccer team that was able to get out, and it was how through sewers they were. Oh, the one was killed. It just horrible. And the judges and the lawyers, the females who were judges and lawyers, and musicians, and that young 17-year-old kid falling off an American airplane because he wanted to play soccer. Like, you're really telling me that he didn't care?
No. I mean, no, why would you? What would give you the impression he did? Is there anything that you? I mean, tell me what. Look at his speeches throughout the whole time. I mean, he simply was emotionally checked out. He did not care one bit. He cared to survive. That's what he cared about. He wanted to survive because he needs to be this transformative president. He needs to show Barack Obama that he isn't an idiot and that he can actually do things. And so this was just a bump in the road. And he doesn't want, if you cared, then then you would actually have to do something about it. And he really obviously didn't do it, and he won't do anything about it. I mean, Afghanistan's over. It's a non-story. He'll never talk about it again. And if the Taliban raises his head up and causes, or should I say Al Qaeda or whatever group within Afghanistan starts to project power, we'll throw a drone attack and kill some allies of us and claim victory, and the media will ignore it. That's just the way it goes. I always said when I was in Congress, I thought how easy it is to be someone on the other side. I mean, I can understand the attraction. It's so easy to be a person on the left because you're not held accountable for anything you say, anything you do. The media will always cover for you. I mean, unless you become a liability to them in some way, they'll always, take care of you. And everything you want to do, you're going to have a band out there, trumpeting what you want to do because it centralizes more power in the government. And of course, because of that, it gives the national media more power because all the power is in Washington, and you're the people communicating to the American public about what goes on in that city, then you are just as powerful as the government. And again, when it comes to the left, there's only one word you have to understand. One word. Everything else doesn't matter. Power. That's all that matters. They believe they are the people who should have all the power because they're the ones who will do what's right, and good for America.
Someone who I know said, well, they were during this is during the Trump administration. Well, the Democrats and the liberals and leftists, they're the, quote, adults in the room. And but what's even crazier how duplicitous is how they actually believe this crap. And, where was the squad? Where was the outcry when ladies who weren't wearing burqas were shot in the face or acid was spilled on them? But when it comes to demonize Israel, a democracy, voting against the Iron Dome, a defensive weapon that prevents the slaughter of men, women, and children, Arabs, Christians, Jews in Israel, they're against it. It just
because Israel shares our values. They share these ideas of Western democracies. And these people are against those values. They find them to be oppressive. They find them to be, bigoted. Or you just go on down the list of their crimes against humanity. So if you are an ally of America, you are the problem, and we need to oppose you.
Yeah, and
that's what they believe.
Yeah, I think you would be crazy if you told me this a year and a half ago. I'd say you're a little off the deep end. You're one of those.
Yeah, I've been saying this for 20 years, and people have said that very much to me. I remember when I wrote the book, people would say, "Oh, you're just exaggerating. You're crazy. You're one of these right wing nuts." And I look back and I've had people read the book and say, yeah, you not only were you right, you probably you actually didn't go far enough. It's actually even worse than what you said it was going to be. And again, I was considered sort of a kook when I wrote it, but it's obvious, and part of the reason it was obvious is number one, all you have to do is look at history and what happens to countries that head down the path that we were headed. But also, I served with these people. I know what they believe.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that Barack Obama, or Joe Biden believe what they believe now, and 20 years ago they believed something different. No, they didn't. They believed 20 years ago what they believe today, and what you're hearing today. They just know that they couldn't say it 20 years ago. They knew that the public wasn't ready to hear what they believed. So they said what they had to say. They even voted the way they felt they have to vote. Oh, yes, I support the institution of marriage until I don't, until I can admit that I never did. And that that this is how I always felt. But I couldn't say it back then because I would have not gotten elected. And so, again, if you understand that the hard left in America actually represents the Democratic Party and has for a long, long time, particularly those in elective office. I'm not saying those in the American public, but I'm saying the folks who take the time and energy to win elective office in the Democratic Party and who are successful. These people are hardcore leftists and have been for a long, long time. And again, you didn't hear it. You have a few honest leftists like Bernie Sanders. I always have a lot of respect for Bernie Sanders, not because I think he's right. I think he's absolutely crazy. But I gave Bernie Sanders credit because he was willing to admit what he actually believed. And everyone else would agree with Sanders, but would never admit it because you can't be a socialist and get elected in America until, in my opinion, until the Soviet Union fell. And once the Soviet Union fell and the boogeyman who was always there to remind the American public how bad socialism was, within a generation, that's what happens. A generation, people forget what the Soviet Union is. They forget what happened there. There's no longer that constant presence of how horrible socialism is in the minds of the American public. And guess what? Now you can go and you can recast socialism into something that's nice and warm and cuddly and teddy bearish and turn it into a new, oh, we can do it better. We'll do it differently. And we can be honest about what we've always believed, but never would admit because it wasn't popular to do it.
Yeah. A few years ago, when Bernie Sanders came out with his announcement that he's going to run for the presidency, he did it in the apartment building in Brooklyn where he was born, where he grew up. And one of my sons happened to be by a friend's apartment who happened to be in that same building. He stuck his head out the window, he sees Secret Service, he sees Bernie Sanders, and he sees a group of Russian Jews, because Russian Jews live in mostly at Brighton Beach, sees them shouting at Bernie Sanders, "You don't know what you're talking about. We lived under communism." And my son asked me, he goes, "What's going on?" I go, "Jeff, these people actually lived what this guy wants to have here, and they know how evil it is. And he's just not getting it." And it's you're right. Here's a guy who took his honeymoon in Russia, Moscow, and then we have De Blasio who took his honeymoon in Havana, Cuba. Like, we don't. You're right. They're actually coming out and saying what they're really showing their true colors. They don't really show it. They always told us what they are. It's all these other ones who are coming out now, joining the bandwagon of what they always felt. And what gets me is this so-called squad who cares so much about rights of everybody in the world. Dennis Prager, he was on the show a while back, and
great man.
He's a guy with courage. He was talking about this for 30 years on his show, and I said, "Dennis, maybe I'm getting this wrong here. Tell me really what the left's goal is." And he said, Dennis is totally straight right out there, the destruction of the United States. I said, "Come on, Dennis, sugarcoat that. But tell me it's not." Nope, the destruction. Maybe I was a little naive. I didn't want to believe it. But as time goes on, my goodness, it continues to crystallize.
You have to understand what he means by destruction of the United States. I mean, there will still be a United States. It just won't be the United States.
Right, that we know. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, the country will still be here in some form or fashion, but it won't be the country. You can make the argument that increasingly it is not the country that we were born into, and it's something that I've been taken to giving a lot of speeches lately, and having a pretty frank discussion with the folks that I'm talking to, and I said, when I was born, you and I were born, it was the greatest country in the world, maybe the greatest country in the history of the world. I mean, we were at the zenith of American power and influence, and we were a country that was a good and moral country. Now, did we have problems? We did, and in fact, the 1960s actually was a terrific time for dealing with that vestige of discrimination and systemic racism that certainly was in many areas across this country. And so the civil rights movement actually, again, showed America at its greatest, in my opinion, which is the church. Martin Luther King was a pastor. I mean, if you look at the people who were involved in the civil rights movement, they were people from
they're people of faith.
They're people of faith.
Yeah.
I mean, who was marching with Martin Luther King's rabbis and Jewish leaders. And I mean, you saw people of faith standing up there, and they had the freedom to do it. Now, and obviously in the South, they didn't have the freedom to do it, but the rest of the country saw it and condemned it. And obviously they were successful. So you have to look at that time in America where really the best of us came forward and stood up for injustice, that stood up for our founding principles, which is that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with inalienable rights. That's what the civil rights movement is about, and that's what America's been about. We weren't perfect, but we kept trying to get better and better. And once we were sort of at the zenith of that, we have achieved that in many ways. That's when things seem to come off the rails. So just when you're at the height of what you thought was, the great American moment, that we were a world power, that we were stood for against communism and the all-powerful totalitarian state, and for the little guy and for the underprivileged, and we wanted, and for freedom. That's when things turned. That's when we started to turn on ourselves. And it's sort of a tragic story over the last 50 years. And we've seen this cultural revolution that's occurred in this country. And here's what I say to people your and my age, because people say, how did it happen? And I always answer the same way. I said, well, go look in the mirror. It happened because you let it happen. I mean, we were here. I can't say, well, someone else was doing. No, I was here. I was in charge, if you will. We all were. We were in charge of our families. We were in charge of our community. We were in charge of our businesses. We were in charge of our friends. I mean, we all had relationships, and we didn't do what the other side did. The other side had a passion to change. They had a passion to tear this country out by its roots and make a new country. And we were candidly fat, dumb, and happy. We thought, oh, we're the greatest country. Oh, these people, let them do what they're doing. It's not going to change who America is. Let these crazies say what they want to say. They're just crazy until they're not crazy anymore. Bernie Sanders was a crazy until now he's the leader of the Democratic Party, and nobody says he's crazy anymore. Yeah. And that's because we sat here and we didn't fight. I can tell you just issue after issue where we capitulated even before we even tried to fight. And so I think what I would say to your listeners is, we all have a responsibility. As Ronald Reagan said, freedom is only one generation away from extinction. We're that generation, folks, and we're living it. And if you want to continue to go down in the history of America, it'll be rewritten. So you'll go down in the history of America as the generation that lost this country, that lost the greatest, last best hope for the world. Go ahead and sit at home and play your video games and do your thing, and make sure you take care of yourself and don't worry about the rest of the world. But you're going to have to answer to not just to history, but to your children and grandchildren for what we've done.
But what gives me hope is Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. No, and they're self-destructing, and every revolution feeds upon itself, and they're going to start feeding upon themselves now. And sensible people have another shot in 2022, the midterm elections. And I was on a talk show a couple of weeks ago, and they were asking me about finance and about what should we do about this and that. And I said, where are interest rates going? Where's the economy going? Where's this? I said, well, there's one thing. We have 2022, less than about a year away. And it's our responsibility to put sensible, fiscally responsible people in office. If we don't, shame on us. So we have that opportunity just a short time away.
And here, I live in Virginia. And here in Virginia, we have an opportunity in 2021, in a few weeks, in a governor's race that will be a bellwether. if a Republican can win the governorship and the Republicans can take back control of the state house here and House of Delegates here in Virginia. So, yeah, there's always an election. But, one of the things I think we do as conservatives is we just worry about elections and let the rest of the of the culture just drift into oblivion. And we can't do that. I mean, you just can't. You can't let woke capitalism
win.
Continue win.
Yeah.
You can't let the universities continue to lie to our children and indoctrinate the next generation. You can't let the propagandists on the national media get away with it. You can't be supporting these folks. You have to go out and you have to be a resistance. And that resistance meaning support businesses and organizations, start your own, but fight back on all those terrorists. When you go to work, don't put up with the crap. And you say, well, you could be fired. Try firing you now. There are not a whole lot of people looking for your job right now, by the way. This is a good time to say, you know what? Mm-hmm. No, you don't. You're gonna play this game. I'll go find a job somewhere else. I mean, at some point, people have to say, I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore, and make sacrifices. That's the thing. Everyone says, oh, I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore, and then you go to work for Google. Well, no, don't go to work for Google. Or if you do go to work for Google, don't do what Google wants you to do and comply with their wokeism. This is, and by the way, the other side did this for decades. They were the grease. They were the cog in the works and making trouble and causing problems. We don't do that. We just say, oh, I'll keep my head down. I want to keep my job. I have a family. Yeah, I get it. But what's that family going to be growing up in America if you don't stand up for the truth? And what are they going to learn from you if they learn that you just go ahead and go along with whatever your pastor says or who is not telling the truth about this new way of looking at the culture or your business or your community or your school board? At some point, freedom dies because people don't stand for freedom, and that's what. And that, by the way, there's no freedom that's ever existed in the world that didn't come with sacrifice. I mean, it's not a natural occurring thing in humanity.
Yeah, your point well taken. It's you have to stand up and be counted, and it's difficult, and it really is difficult, especially, it's easy to do the right thing when there's not much on the line. But when it's money on the line, your family on the line, your position on the line, doing the right thing is a hard thing to do.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, and look, we have a society right now that because of these things right here, everybody wants to be liked. They want people to say nice things about them and think they're great, and no one wants to be shunned on social media or being spoken bad of, because being famous and being liked are the most important qualities. It's not the most important thing. I mean, having the world love you is not. Right. It should not be your goal in life. Being one of the people who helped save this country should be a lot more important than that.
So what else concerns me, and you've sat next to him, and you know exactly you know a lot more than the average person. Joe Biden's foreign policy. Is there a foreign policy? What's a game plan here?
Again, I hate to be. If you go back to what Dennis Prager said, they want to destroy America. Well, one of the ways you destroy America is you destroy America's credibility around the world. And if America is not seen as a force for good, and right now I don't think we are, then we have no responsibilities. And if we have no responsibilities, right? If no one is looking to us and we can, this is one of my concerns with the American right. As we see this increasing movement upon the right to say, well, it's not our job to be the leaders of the free world. It's not our responsibility to be the policeman. Well, to be the policeman of, I don't know of anywhere where we're policing anything. I mean, what we're doing, every place we are, we're there for our own national security interests. We're there because that helps keep us safe. And by the way, police keep us safe. So, and by the way, police is a dangerous job, but it's not the most dangerous job in the world. It's being out there stopping crime from happening actually is fairly safe, as opposed to being involved in active wars is very unsafe. And so we can withdraw, which is what we're seeing from this administration, but you're going to end up paying a heavier price for not being there, keeping the peace, just like the defund the police movement. I mean, the analogies are incredible. I mean, pull the police out of a neighborhood. What happens to the neighborhood? It's not a place you want to go into, and people get hurt. And by the way, that doesn't usually just stay in the neighborhood. People outside the neighborhood get hurt. And that's sort of the same thing. We're in a neighborhood, and you can either stay in the neighborhood where you know things are problems and keep a presence there to make sure that you're keeping a lid on those problems, or you can pull out, which is what the left seems to love to do, and unfortunately some on the right, and end up with a bigger problem than you had in the first place. So to answer your question directly, Joe Biden's idea is, and the left's idea is, discredit America around the world, relieve us of our responsibilities to have any expenditure of funds, so we can take those funds and we can buy more votes here in the United States. I mean, this is the lens. Look at any Democratic campaign commercial. Every Democratic campaign commercial is trying to buy you. They're saying, look, we're going to tax somebody else and we're going to give you a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, do people really believe this?
Yes.
I mean, does anyone really believe there is a Santa Claus that if you just give the government a little bit more money, $5 trillion is enough. We need 6. But if you give us that 6, then everything will be okay. And the idea that people believe this, that somehow or another, that these shysters in Washington, D.C., if you just give them more money, your life's going to be better. But that's, I hate to say it. I mean, it's worked. It works. That if you promise people something for nothing, there's a lot of people out there who
are willing to take it. Yeah, the last year I've seen that. I've seen people just, this is great. I get a check every month or every week or whatever it was, not to work, and a PPP and all government loans, and it was great. It's absolutely great.
Did you ever ask them, are they happy?
Happy, I don't know if the thing was happy, but I always ask them, who do you think is giving you, where do you think they're going to get this money from? We're just going to see this in taxes. You're eventually going to have to, face the man and pay back. And it's going to be us who are going to be paying it back. And
I agree with all that. But the problem with that argument, Charles, is that it requires some, looking into the future and making moral judgments. Whereas I think the more simple thing is, okay, how's this working out for you? Are you happy? Is the fact that you're staying home and you're not working and someone's paying you and you're being taken care of, does that make you happy? Do you feel fulfilled? Do you feel like your life is meaningful? And the answer to that is, you need to ask that question, because the answer is obvious. If you look at the rates of depression and mental illness and all of the tremendous unhappiness that we have in this country. Arthur Brooks is a friend. He used to run AEI. He wrote this nice little book. I encourage you to read it. It's called About Earned Success. People, in order to feel happy, have to feel a sense of accomplishment. Having, we aren't, we aren't just, I don't know if you've read The Brave New World, but we aren't just people who, just give us our food, give us our drugs, give us it so we can just exist. And that all of a sudden we'll feel good about that. No one feels good about that. You can say, oh, well, it's easier and whatever, but I don't think people are happy. They may exist, but, we're meant to do things. We're meant to interact. We're meant to achieve things and be our best selves. And what the Democrats are proposing is not. They're proposing dependency. They're, a reliance upon someone outside of yourself for your own well-being. And that is just a dangerous, dangerous course.
I think it was President Eisenhower said, you can get 3 meals at a cot in prison, but we were made for much more than that. And, I think you hit it on the head when you said exist. I think if you ask people are happy or not, that's a choice they have to make. But the thing is they're existing. You're getting food on your table, you're getting rent, but this country didn't become what it was by people who just wanted to exist. You know, my grandparents came here with nothing, you know, just the clothes around their back, and they built, and it was a sense of accomplishment to build for the next generation. And take away that, you know, look, you know, it's just amazing. All the innovation, all the technological innovation, the biggest companies in the world, all are here. Why are they here? It works. This system works, and we're trying to snuff it out. You know, so it just is said. All right, so you got to make me happy here. So 2024, what does that look like to you?
Well, at this point, I really don't think it matters whether the Democrats pass something or not. The president thinks he has to pass this infrastructure bill and he has to pass this other bill. And if he does that, everything will be better. I think the worst thing that can happen to the Democrats is they actually pass these things. Because if they pass these things, what's going to happen is you're going to see inflation take off even more. And for whatever benefits they're going to throw at people, as you know, because the amount of money they're spending is going to be less, they're going to have to phase in their programs. People aren't going to see it or recognize it. Certainly by 2022, they're not going to have any idea what the Democrats, quote, did for them. And it'll be, you know, it's temporary, it's fleeting. And what isn't fleeting is, you know, going to the grocery store and seeing, you know, the price of eggs go up and the price of milk go up. Try
to go buy a car. Try to go buy a house.
Yeah, my daughter, bless her heart. I mean, my daughter just bought a car, and I mean, you know, she had like 2 or 3 cars to choose from. I mean, there just aren't any cars, and she had to pay basically list price. You know, they knocked $1,000 off because they just did it because, you know, if you negotiate, they have to give you something because otherwise you're not going to buy it. But I mean, she paid basically top dollar for a car. And, you know, she's also, you know, she's married, she's certain for a home. I mean, people are paying, I mean, they're paying overpriced. I mean, they're paying more than what they're listing. I mean, it's insane. And if you think that is going to, that continuation, which obviously continues to be the case, this inflation going up, it hurts energy. I use that as an example.
You know, I think the New York Post had a front page article the other day that just present inflation, what's happening now is costing the average American, not the rich class, not the 1%, $175 a month. And that's not including New York. It's costing much more. Come to New York and see what grocery prices are and rents and houses. It's just absolutely staggering. And just give you a quick example. This summer, right before the summer, I got a Tesla. And my son said, you got to get one of these boxes, electrical boxes, so you could charge the car or what have you. And I called up an electrician, and it so happens that it's probably the most expensive thing because my electric box is on the other side of the house, so he has to bring upon the stuff from all the way other. I don't even know what it is. Anyway, he said, that's $2,200. I said, wow, could we negotiate that? Or he goes, yeah, next week it's going to be $2,600 because copper prices are going up. And, you know, I said to my kids, I said, this is what happened in the 70s. This is what happened under Carter. You never looked, and, you know, whatever price you paid, you were happy because tomorrow it's going up. You don't know what kind of existence that is. It's terrible.
And energy is even worse because for low-income people and moderate-income people, energy is a
they're
huge
getting killed.
part of it.
Getting killed.
And they're getting killed right now.
And we didn't hit winter. We didn't hit winter yet.
Yeah, and I that's what I'm saying. I don't think it matters what the Democrats do. I think their goose is cooked. And the only way we can mess it up is if Republicans somehow, you know, do what the Democrats do, is overplay their hand or do something really stupid like cave on a debt extension bill.
Okay, I don't think that's going to happen. But here's what I'm seeing, and you know much, much more than this. If President Trump decides to run again, how do you see that playing out? Because he's making every indication that he is going to run again.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, look, if whether he's running or not, he has to say he's running, or at least give every indication he's running, because if he gives an indication he's not running, he becomes less relevant.
Okay.
And if there's one thing Donald Trump does not like to be, is less relevant. So whether he runs or not, I don't know. I think right now, I would say the chances are probably, 51-49 he does run. But let's wait and see. A lot of things can happen, and 2022 could be a good year. You can see a lot of gubernatorial candidates, like guys like Ron DeSantis and others who are up for election, come off a really strong election and be in a good position. Trump brings a lot of positives in the sense that here's someone who put forth a very strong agenda that was pro-growth, and he's the one that tackled COVID and got the Operation Warp Speed and did amazing things, which we can tell the truth, not what the media is telling people right now as far as Joe Biden solving COVID. And there will be, whether Donald Trump runs or not, I know whoever wins the Republican primary is going to create a clear choice. We're not going to nominate John McCain. We're not going to nominate Mitt Romney. We're going to nominate someone who's going to provide a clear alternative to whoever the other side has.
Right.
So Donald Trump, and this is what I would say to President Trump, in a sense, you've won already, because whoever is the nominee is going to be more like you than John McCain. And that's a win for the country, in my opinion. It's a win for the party. And so I would say to him, he doesn't need to run. He brings, unlike a DeSantis or unlike, I don't know, there's 3 or 4, Kristi Noem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of folks out there who are thinking of running, mostly governors, by the way. Unlike, the past, I mean, we're going to have a real strong, principled candidate who, because of Trump's influence on the party, is going to end up winning the nomination. And they won't have the baggage that Donald Trump has. And Donald Trump, I voted for Donald Trump. I support Donald Trump, but Donald Trump, has a lot of issues that drive away a lot of voters. But his policies don't, and a more modulating style would not. So we'll wait and see what he does. But either way, I would make the argument that Trump's going to be on the ballot in one form or another.
Yeah, it's Republicans' game to lose. That's really it. If just just played out. All right, Ralph.
Well, I don't even know who the Democratic candidate is going to be. I don't think it's going to be Joe Biden. I'm not even sure he's going to make it through the 4 years, and certainly won't be Kamala Harris. She's less popular than Biden. They'll come up with somebody else. But here's the beautiful thing: whoever they come up with, whether it's moderate or conservative, it won't matter, because it's going to be very, very clear whoever the Democrats put forward. They put forward their most moderate candidate, and he turned out to be left to Bernie Sanders. So, the idea the Democratic Party can hide who they are from the American public, that day is over, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you, because the American people, you fool me once, maybe. You don't fool the American people twice. This country is built on a lot of pragmatic thinking, and we might get it wrong every now and then, like you mentioned about race and so on and so forth. But the greatness of this country, it's a self-correcting nation. We had slavery, but women weren't allowed to vote, so we do get it right more often than we get it wrong. And when we are wrong at it, we work to get it right. And that's really the greatness of this country. So I think you give the American people, it's like we had here in New York, you had, before you had Giuliani, before you had Bloomberg, you had Dinkins. And now de Blasio is going to give the next governor a good stretch, because we saw the progressive side and we saw it doesn't work. It only doesn't work. It's just terrible. Just terrible.
Well, it'd be great. That would be a huge turn of events if someone like Elise Zeldin or someone like that could win in New York in the governorship. So those are the kinds of big changes that could make a difference in 2022 and 2024.
Yeah, and looking forward, you can't find them, but looking back, you'll say, "Oh, that was it." And it's probably been something inconsequential that we're not even talking about. It's not even on the radar. It's going to be some turning event that probably no one saw, no one predicted, but we're going to say that's it, because that's the way politics works.
Yeah, and I would say just one more thing, and just a reminder that we had backlashes before. We had a backlash in 2010 to Barack Obama and Obamacare. But if we aren't prepared for two things, number one, to actually govern after those backlashes. I look back at 1994. That was the first revolution, where the first time in 40 years, the Republicans won the House of Representatives. We won the United States Senate. I was part of a group of 9 senators. We had a 10 vote majority. We had 55 Republican senators.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 36 when I got elected.
36. That's crazy,
yeah.
huh? Looking back, you say, is that amazing?
Yeah, no, I always say I'm the most blessed man I've
Holy
ever
smokes,
met.
that's crazy.
Yeah, I was in the House when I was 32 and then got elected to the Senate when I was 36.
Wow.
But here's the difference. We governed, even though we had a Democratic president. We governed. We passed welfare reform. We passed, tax. We passed some tax changes. We did. We ended up balancing the budget.
Yeah.
I mean, we pushed conservative policies, and we campaigned on. And what happened after 2010 is we couldn't govern. Obama wasn't gonna help, and when we finally got back control in 2016, we didn't govern because we weren't prepared. We allowed Obamacare to stay on the books. We couldn't come to an agreement. We couldn't get our act together and govern.
Yeah.
Even with we had a small majority, but we had a majority that could have done something. We did nothing. And that's very, very important. We have to learn that, if we're successful in 2022, we won't be able to govern. President Biden will block everything. But if we do what we did in 16, which is win the White House back in 24, we better be ready to govern. We better be ready to actually show the American public that we can bring frankly, both sides together and get some things done that the public would like to see done.
Yeah, great point. Great point. All right, Senator Rick Santorum, thanks so much. I loved it. I could speak to you for hours here. You give me some hope, and I love you for that. That's this.
Well, I know that you have it, but what I want to give your listeners is hope. Is look, America is the greatest country in the world. Most countries that get to this point in their evolutionary cycle, if you will, decline and fail. I am not one who believes that America is going to follow the course of every other civilization in the history of man, because we're different than any other civilization in the history of man. No country was founded on our principles. No country is. I mean, all these countries before basically, authoritarian regimes or governed by kings and emperors, and there was no commonality. There was no common
cause. There was no common cause.
Common cause. America, I always say America is not an ethnicity. I mean, you're a hyphenated American, right? America is believing in a sense of values and principles. And that's what makes us Americans. People come here and can become an American. I mean, you can go to Russia and you're not going to become a Russian.
Go to Sweden, it'll take you years, right?
You can't be Russian.
Look at Japan.
Right?
These countries take decades. You can't
go to Japan. Japanese. Right, but you can come to America and be an American.
Yeah.
Because America isn't an ethnicity; it's a set of principles. And here's the most important thing you have to understand: the left wants to change those principles.
Yeah.
That's when they say destroy America. They want to change what America is, and you cannot let that happen. And so that's why. So I want to give people hope that I think we can recover, but we can only recover if people are willing to stand up, take responsibility. It's your fault. What am I going to do about it? And maybe it's just your own family. Maybe it's just talking to your own children to make sure they got their heads screwed on straight when it comes to these things. Maybe it's working within your church or synagogue. Maybe it's working at your place of business. But whatever it is, big or small, you got to do something, because what's happening right now is not working.
Yeah. Wow. Good point. Good point. Where can my listeners find you? Where were you spreading that great stuff?
Well, I'm working with Convention of the States, so you'll see me out there talking about the Article 5 Convention and trying to make structural reforms in Washington, D.C. to take power away from Washington. So you can follow me there, or you can follow me at Patriot Voices, which is my PAC. And we get involved in a whole host of issues. We're much more on the cultural side and sort of the blue collar conservative type movement that I wrote a book many years ago called Blue Collar Conservatives, and which I think sort of laid out the principles of how Donald Trump won and how we can form coalitions of working men and women who still have the values that made America great, and see the elites as trying to change those values. And we've got to align with them and work with them to restore those American principles. So either place, Patriot Voices or Convention of the States, you can find me.
Outstanding. Keep fighting the good fight. God bless you, and keep doing such great work. Really, really a pleasure. And I have to have you on the show again if you'd like to come on, because this was great stuff, man. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Charles Mizrahi Show. If you're a new listener, welcome. If you've been listening for a while, we're glad to have you back. Either way, We'd love to know what you think of the show. Please leave a review if you listen on Apple Podcasts. Reviews make it easier for others to find the show. You can also see the video of the interview on the Charles Mizrahi Show channel on YouTube.